Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's podcast, I have with me a lovely couple of guests, and this is going to blow your mind, but in a good way. I've got Katherine Priestley and Glenn Melford-Colegate, and they are both from Enigma Net. Katherine and Glenn, thank you ever so much for joining me. It's lovely to see you.
Thanks for having us on, Liz.
So it's funny because I don't often have like a couple of people join me, so it's quite nice. I feel quite cosy with it with you both. But we've spoken a few times, haven't we, about your products, about Enigma Net. So I'm just going to start off by saying, so Katherine is the CEO, and Glenn is the founder and the Co-CTO of Enigma Net. Can you start off with, and I'm going to go to you first, Glenn. I always ask this at the beginning of the podcast. Give me a little bit of your background and what brought you to forming Enigma Net.
Well, so I started off in '97 working for a company in South Wales called High Tech Assemblies. I was actually meant to be going into the RAF, but it turns out I was long-sighted in one eye and short-sighted in the other.
Oh no!
My boss at the time, because I worked there part-time, he said, "Well, you're too bright to go and just work on an assembly line. So do you want to take an apprenticeship here?" He says, pay's terrible. You're going to get treated like dirt, he says, but I'm sure you'll get something out of it. So I started my apprenticeship and sure enough, got introduced into CAD design, got to work on the line, building the machines, the wire harnesses and everything else like that. And I basically got my break when we started to look at touchscreen technology.
Okay.
So in '98, a company out in Holland wanted to do an internet cafe, but they wanted it all touchscreen. So I designed the first touchscreen terminal that went out into the market.
Oh, wow.
And then beyond there, started to get involved with self-service kiosks. So I did the first ones that went into Argos, for example.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Yeah. Consulted on with NCR and IBM on the self-service kiosks that you see in Tesco's and things like that, but also kept an eye on sort of the amusement stuff that I'd done previously. So I still did a lot with casinos and worked with companies in America as well that were doing off-track sports betting. And that's when I really became aware of the issues with the internet at that point, because we were doing, chip and pin that was basically called unattended. So this meant that, we're not in control of the device. We don't have anybody on hand who can just go and reset it. And we quickly became aware of all the problems, with streaming services and everything else like that. That company struggled because of this, our call-out charges and everything else. So essentially that company died a death because of the internet.
Oh, God.
So at that point, there were several other technologies that I was looking at doing, but I knew ultimately that if I had to get those technologies working, I had to find a way to fix the internet. So that was why I founded Enigma and met with Katherine.
My goodness. Katherine, so give me some of your background and why you joined Glenn.
Yeah, well, thank you, Liz. So I have a background in finance and investing, and I have been investing in technology companies for I guess 30 years now. I used to say 20 years, but it's been so long saying 20 years, it must be 30 years by now. And, a whole range of technologies from biotechnology all the way through to cybersecurity. But, always looking, starting with the question, what's the problem that we're trying to solve here? And how big is that problem? How easy is it to access solutions? That's the sort of the starting place. And then the second place is, who are the creative people behind the solutions? Who are the tech people? And just how good are they? And that part's the harder part, as you can imagine. So when Glenn came to me with, the problem is solving the internet, that's a very big problem with a lot of applications. Just spending a little bit of time with Glenn, I realized that he's very unusual and that his technical competency covers quite a wide dimension of areas. Often you find as a super tech person very singularly focused, and you have to string a few of these people together and work in collaboration. It's amazing how far Glenn's brain stretches, both across a wide spectrum, but also deeply. And you can really start to tackle some very interesting problems when you work with a polymath. So it was a pleasure to join with Glenn and start to build Enigma Net.
So I was just going to start off, and I told you I was going to say this before when we were talking beforehand. Excuse me. I see myself as quite a geeky person. I like tech. I think I'm a bit of a geek. But I think what we need to do today is to break down what you do into simple terms. And so much so that, because we talked before, we had a call before for quite a while, didn't we? So much so today I kind of did a little ChatGPT. I had asked ChatGPT a question, and I said, what does Enigma Net provide? And I've read this out to you before. I'm going to read this out for everybody else. So it says, Enigma Net provides businesses with a specialised internet service called an accelerated private network, or an APN. Think of this as a private secure motorway for your company's data, separate from the public internet. This setup ensures that your data travels quickly and safely, reducing the risk of cyber threats and improving overall performance. Their technology is designed to be easy to install and works with your existing systems, offering a cost-effective solution to common internet connectivity challenges. Now, you said before, didn't you, that was it was very, very simplified. But can you tell me now that I've read that? That is kind of sort of on the right lines, isn't it? Glenn, tell me a bit more about, so what is an accelerated private network, and what is it, and why is it important to know about it?
Yeah, so if you look at your analogy, for example, I mean, you can basically put it in terms of like the actual UK's motorway network, right? If you think of the internet as the current M6, M25, it's full of potholes that trips up cars. It's congested. It's, it doesn't have the right on and off points to get people where they are and everything. That is the public internet. Think of what we do more as like the M6 toll. Yeah. Or
like that.
Or the Elizabeth line, it's something that literally
I like that too.
cuts through and bypasses it, but does it in a very secure way as well. It's kind of like if you had the M6 toll road and you put a tunnel over the top of it, then your data is what goes through that effectively. But that tunnel is almost impenetrable because of the way we do it.
I like that. Oh my goodness. If anybody hasn't got that, we'll keep talking. We'll keep coming back to that, but that is a really, really, I love my analogies, so that is fantastic. So you're talking about the potholes in the internet.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of those problems in the internet, and what does Enigma Net solve with regards to those for businesses?
Yeah, so basically those potholes are things like, so the green boxes at the end of your drive?
Yeah.
They've effectively not had any technology updates probably in the last 10, 15 years.
You mean telephone books, as in the little, what do they call them?
The exchanges.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, they're running old, outdated technology, and the ISPs, because they're in a race to the bottom at the moment, they're not upgrading those. Yeah. They could literally do that and give us, 50% more capacity overnight. They have no intention of doing it.
No.
You've got this mix of copper and fiber in the UK. And anywhere where you've got copper, you've got congestion. Anywhere there's congestion, it impacts even where the fiber is. You've got ISPs that are lying when they say full fiber. This was a term that was coined, and it means nothing basically, because it means there's fiber somewhere there. But they say full fiber like you get into your door, and people still don't recognize it's still a little bit of coax that they get into their router basically.
Oh wow.
You've then got things like, obviously, companies, because they can't do anything, they're encrypting the data packets. So the packets that are actually going out on the internet are getting fatter. That's causing more congestion. Too many requests, people are getting Ring doorbells that kettle and the toaster are now getting smart and sending information on the internet.
Yeah.
So you've got all these extra devices that are just sending data. And then on top of all of that, you've got this thing called net neutrality, where ISPs are not allowed to deprioritize anything. They have to let all the traffic through at whatever speed it wants. So effectively, all of those things, they cause instability issues, capacity issues, and a whole host of things. Not to mention, as obviously Katherine will explain it better than I can, because I go very tech, but she can explain the inefficiencies of protocols in a way that sort of people explain, because I keep on going into, every byte of data that goes through there.
Well, can I just go back a step as well? So you were just talking then about copper congestion. So what is it about copper? Because I know that copper's been around a long time, and then that you've totally opened my eyes to the whole. It's not full fibre at all, but actually, and I do know a little bit about the exchange box. I did used to work in telecoms for a little while, but what is it about copper? What is it? What is this? Why does it cause congestion? If I can say it right.
So essentially, the way that copper works, I mean, it's the same as your a network cable at home. It's a twisted pair of wires.
Yeah.
So effectively, the copper congestion comes when if you try to put too much information in, because of that twisted pair, the information going one way and the other way actually bang into each other and they remove each other. So that information has to be resent.
Oh my God.
There's
Okay.
a physical limit how much you can get down that copper, which is why when you see them sort of at the data centers now, the copper bundles are like this, but the fiber optic bundles are like that effectively. But it's a legacy network. It's been there since the start of telecoms, and people are still trying to use it rather than ripping it up and throwing it away.
I think the other aspect, if I may jump in for a moment, there's this, it's hard to compute, to actually kind of visualize the numbers in terms of the dramatic rise in the use of the internet. So if you think about the data traffic, whether that's our voice traffic, whether that's videos, whether that's complex math and spreadsheets that engineers are sending around the internet, movie, music, etc., the data that we're trying to send across these old legacy systems has grown exponentially. So not only in quantum, but in complexity as well. And so there just has been decades of underinvestment in the basic infrastructure of the internet to cope with this exponential growth. And as Glenn says, if you think about net neutrality, it means every time someone's trying to upload a cat video to TikTok, that is competing with your company's, vital engineering documents that need to get across to a customer, or it's competing with government security informations, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of competition for the bandwidth. And as we have discovered, just more bandwidth isn't actually necessarily the answer. So what regularly happens to me when I complain to my service provider, won't mention the name because they're all almost as bad as each other, but I think my service provider just did rank absolutely bottom in terms of customer service, is they just say, look, all they do is try and sell you. They try and upsell you more bandwidth. And it just isn't the solution because of the nature of which data actually transfers through the system, through the traditional transfer protocols. So we probably don't want to get too much into the complexity of that. But for me, breaking it down, when I look at what are the core things people want out of their internet service, they want reliability. I need it to work all the time and very consistently.
Yeah.
I want to be secure. I don't want to have cyber hacks.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got stability and security there. I want it to be fast. I don't want to have to wait too long for anything to upload or download. And I want it to be private. I don't want to have my information necessarily out there about me knowing it. And when we've looked at how systems have been built, one on top of the other, what we observe is, in order to solve for security, you've had to compromise on your speed and your stability in the past. In order to solve for privacy, or you think you're solving for privacy, a lot of people have gone to VPNs to solve for privacy, but they're very hackable. They're not secure, as we know from hacks. They haven't, and they're not secure, and they're certainly not fast. Adding a heavy, what we call a heavy system on top of your existing system sucks your bandwidth, as do cybersecurity software. So the problem we're trying to solve for is, how do we give you stability, security, speed, and privacy all together without compromising at all, and do that so that we can plug into your existing system. You don't have to strip everything out and start again, and do it at a price that you can afford. And that is Enigma Net.
Oh, you're very good at doing this, aren't you? No, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. And so, okay, the sectors that you guys work with, you're already working with different sectors, okay? And you know who I've talked to on this podcast. What businesses would benefit most from using Enigma Net that aren't currently using it? Glenn. Well, yeah. Either of you, actually, go on, Katherine.
To be honest, there's a whole heap. I mean, anybody that relies on the internet for their business in any way, shape, or form needs Enigma Net. So it doesn't matter whether you are taking payments, whether you are transferring large files. You know, if you're a movie studio, a hospital. You know, if you rely on privacy and security, if you're infrastructure, if you're a pipeline. An electrical distribution grid or anything like that, anything where you need that security, that speed of transmission, or just that constant uptime. Like we said, Liz, just even doing podcasts, if you want to make sure that you never drop a call or a connection while you're doing these things, you would rely on Enigma Net. There's technology in there that takes away all the inefficiencies from TCP protocols, and it helps bolster UDP as well by, providing more pathways and things like that.
Tell me those words. You'd given me words. I don't.
Yeah. So basically, TCP, it makes up 80% of all of the internet transmission.
Right. Okay. I just thought it was something you'd put on when you cut yourself.
No. So so everything you do gets converted to a protocol. Right, so right down from where your copper comes into your house or your fiber comes in.
Yeah.
It's coming in data packets. These packets are either TCP or they're UDP.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, UDP is great. It's fast. The reason is they send out thousands of these packets and they just hope they reach the other side. God. TCP relies on you actually handshaking with the other side and saying, I'm ready to send you a packet, sends you a packet, waits for you to say you've received it, sends another packet.
God.
It's an inefficient system. So one is very good at getting a lot of data out. One is very good at making sure that it does it consistently.
Yeah.
Our tunnel does the best of both.
Okay.
Because our tunnel does the handshaking. And then we can send data in a similar fashion to UDP. Only we do something very special in the middle.
Is yours like giving it a big hug, all of it?
Oh, just
you're kind of hugging it. You're kind of going, come here, we'll look after you. Yeah. We're going to make sure that this customer has this. I'm hugging you now.
Yeah.
So we can do it very securely, which is very important for so much business application. But the other point is we can do it very fast. So we can do that. We can transmit data up to 64 times faster. And that is material because that builds a lot of efficiency into businesses. There are so many studies done about what is British business suffering as a result of poor internet. And there's a vast array of numbers. So it is quite difficult to kind of pin down sort of very reliable data. And of course, it's growing by the day, but it's in the order of about 60 billion pounds a year. It's a very big number from the inefficiencies of the internet. So, and that doesn't really include the cost of cyber hacks. God. So that's a whole different number, in its own right. So that we know, we hear the government talk a lot about worrying about the inefficiency of British business, the lack of productivity. Well, sorting out the internet and becoming efficient without changing, making sure we've got fiber everywhere, without really changing what the ISPs do, just adding new technology, it can be a game changer. So there's a very big purpose here for all of us. But thinking about business applications and where do we start? Because, it's very, very hard when you've got a great tech and you've got so many potential applications. You go and look for sort of early industry problems that you want to solve. And one of the ones that we've identified is the EV charging market, which I know is something very dear to your listeners' hearts. So,
Yes.
Be happy to talk more about that if you like, Liz.
Absolutely. Do you know what I want to just say though? You've just opened my mind to something, because of the work that I do with consultancy, and I've been working in business improvement for a long time now. I've been to so many companies where half of their problem is that the systems that they use or are using or have introduced just don't give them what they need. I was working with a water company quite a few years ago over in, well, I actually don't want to say where they are because that'd really give it away. But this water company, all of their systems were they just crashed. They were crashing. There were different systems they were not interconnecting to each other. And there were things that we're talking about water companies. We're talking about, this is another infrastructure. And the system that they were using was broken, or the systems they were using just weren't working. So everything they did took twice or three times as long. Now, you talk about efficiency. That's part of what I'm, as a consultant, improving business is, that's my joie de vivre. So actually looking at the money that they'd spent on things that weren't working was horrific, because you're talking about people who were having to work till 6 and 7 o'clock at night later because of the fact that the systems weren't working. They couldn't get their regular jobs done. You talk about, you take, some of those issues away, you're halving that time. They can do their jobs and don't feel like they're firefighting all the time.
Exactly.
This is really at the heart of what we're trying to achieve. Really help businesses drive efficiency simply by having your data fast and securely transmitted around whatever is your universe.
Absolutely. So let's just go back to what you were just saying then, Katherine, about identifying the EV charging sector as one that actually could do with Enigma Net to be, form part of what they're providing. Glenn, tell me why is that? Why specifically EV charging? Why have you identified that out of, the number of sectors you're already working with? What is it about EV charging that actually makes you think, right, okay, this is a system. These are things that we need to sort out?
I think it was a proximity thing for me, because obviously one of our team members, who you've met, obviously Stephen, was part of that. I actually worked with Morris Commercial designing their electric van. So, I went to the fully charged shows and I walked around, got to talk. And the thing is, the amazing thing is obviously when the first fully charged show started, there was a few car manufacturers. There were tens, if not, 30 charge companies.
Yes, I remember that.
And, I'm walking around and I'm chatting to them and I'm saying, well, this is great, but I can see that obviously you've got a payment terminal here. How are you getting around the issues with payment terminals? And they were all very guarded. And it was like, oh, we don't have any problems with that. We have no problems at all. And I'm like, come on, I've been in this industry for years. I can tell you now, you've got issues with that. How are you getting around it? And none of them had an answer, which meant that, just like my off-track betting terminals, just like my, self-service kiosks in stores, I knew these people were going to have issues because their infrastructure was relying on the same thing that we were relying on.
Go on, tell me about, so what is it? Because obviously, a lot of people don't realise what goes into a charge point. It isn't just about getting energy to that charge point, is it? It's about the back office systems, the hardware, the payment terminal. It's all of the other kind of things that integrate into one product that you plug into your car. So what was it about the payment terminal that kind of, what is it that causes a problem?
Yeah, so the thing with payment terminals that causes the issue, there's two things really that happened with payment terminals that causes this issue. One is PCI compliance. We'll get back to that in a second. The main thing that causes the problem was when they first launched chip and pin devices, they came with something called a LAN controller.
Right.
And what this LAN controller did, it actually created a private tunnel to the payment gateway, right? And that's how it processed it. Now, this was back in the day where the internet wasn't as congested and everything else. So the first thing that happened with PCI compliance was that the card reading manufacturers were saying, providing this box to our customers is a barrier to entry, we want to get rid of it. We can make the connection secure enough that we don't need this. So they got rid of it. So they solely then relied on the internet and their encryption to actually process payments. Now, that was fine before, you know, millions of these payment terminals went out, before, you know, video conferencing exploded by 30 times during the pandemic, before everybody stopped using cash. Yeah. You know, this was all fine. Now, the problem is that all of this data has to get to the payment processors and back within 100 milliseconds. If it doesn't, it triggers the false detection, and it thinks that there might be a man-in-the-middle attack or there's some degradation, and it's not getting all the information to actually sign off that purchase. That's why you could be stood there and you tap your chip and pin.
Oh, don't. Yeah.
And then they say, oh, sorry, it's not gone through. And it's because it hasn't completed it within that 100 milliseconds.
Oh, my God.
Now, the thing is, when you think about EV charging, it's got to authorize a much larger transaction. So effectively, the checks are 3 times just your normal below £30 amount. You know, it's got to send all that information. And the thing is, if the charger is in a remote location or it's in a congested location like a shopping center or something like that where a lot of people are, it's battling for a lot of traffic. So that's the one thing. So you've got the payment terminal within the device, that's, got to be sending this data. At the same time, the back end has to be in constant communication with that payment device and the charging unit itself to keep it updated of what's going on, to say when it can release that charge or not. There's so many steps that it has to go through that if the connection drops or falters, even for a couple of seconds, that cycle has to start again. Or it's held in a way that isn't technically legal because it's actually lost communication.
Oh my goodness. So I'm just going to give an example of something that me and my husband had just over a week ago. We went down to Bournemouth, and everybody knows who listens to the podcast regularly, we've only got a small battery in our car. It's 38.5 kilowatt hour battery. We had to charge when we got down there. It's cold, you get less range when it's colder, which is fine. My husband was driving, so we usually get more because he drives slower. But anyway, so we got down there, we knew we had to charge. I'm not going to say which charge point operator it was, but it was an older model, and there's not really much in Eastbourne, so we went to this one model and we were there for 15 minutes. I'm not joking, it was freezing, and I've talked about the initiation dance previously, and this one was tap, plug in, initiate, but tap to pay, plug in and initiate. It wasn't the other way round. We were there for 15 minutes and the payment terminal we just kept getting this error coming up, big cross on the screen, error, not done it. I now understand why, what you're saying. But the other thing was, so we rang the customer support number, they rebooted the terminal, or they rebooted the charger, and it still was coming up with that same error. So it sounds to me from what you're saying there was a problem actually on the payment terminal first and foremost, or maybe like you say, that connection with the back office or something had gone really badly wrong. And actually this company is known for failing chargers. It's not a very highly rated. They're very, very well known, and I'm not going to say who they are, but like I say, it was a shocking experience, really.
Like I said, back in, I would say 2005, there was one particular shop that had these, and because they knew of these issues, their fix was to actually put twice as many terminals in to cope with the issue. and that was it.
which of course in turn just creates more congestion and,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so much inefficiency.
Oh my
You know,
God.
sort of doing a little research in the industry, as we always do when we go to tackle an industry problem. You know, we can see the challenges to get more EV charging availability across the country. That's really important to obviously increase the number of EV cars on the road. But if up to 30% of your EV charge is not working at any one time, which is the current sort of stats, then you naturally think you're going to have to build over capacity in order to just be online for your demand at any one period of time. I mean, that's just a ridiculous way to go about things. What we've got to do is make sure each and every charger works. So then you look at, well, why are chargers failing? Yeah. And what comes up regularly is poor maintenance. And that can be software maintenance. That's not just, the nozzle is broken or whatever it might be. That's quite often software maintenance. And they rely on the internet to update their software regularly. And when the internet's not working, you get a failure in update of software, which will render the system, with the big cross as you drive up.
Yeah.
And of course, payments is the other massive frustration, that there isn't enough network connectivity issues, breakdowns, etc. So payments are not being completed, so people can't access the EV charger. So those are really solvable things. Those are really solvable. I'm not saying that'll take away the 30% issues, but you're going to see a radical decrease in the number of non-working EV chargers that we already have spent money putting that infrastructure in. And so you raise the efficiency of the industry really pretty quickly by adding our system into all the charging stations. And it's not expensive. It's not complicated to do that, and it's not expensive to do that.
No, and that's the main thing, because I know that the EV charging is very expensive. Just you put in a high powered DC term, charger in, and we're talking thousands, and that's without actually the installation costs. So I know that the charge point operators will want, they're obviously
charge point operators. Like, if that's down, they're not gaining revenue on it.
Very true.
And this is the thing, that they should be motivated to do this, because it's not just about the customer experience. They're losing revenue. If they have to show up there and it's not working, instantly customers are turned off to that particular location because they remember what they had the last time. They will find somewhere else. Yeah,
it's like we'll never go back to that one we went to. Yeah. We'll never go back to that one we went to.
Exactly.
It's it's the two R's, isn't it? Revenue and reputation. Yeah. Because actually your reputation drops and therefore your revenue drops. And we're trying to, we need to, I've said this lots of times on the podcast, we need to boost that kind of, the way people think about EV charging. Because if we are talking about situations like me and my husband experienced, and I know this from the work that we've done at Full Circle, that actually lots of people, like you say, if you're saying, Katherine, 30%,
in certain areas, those are the reports I'm reading. Up to 30%. Well, on average, the average numbers I've been reading is 17-18%. Well, can you imagine boosting your top line revenue by 17-18%? That's most of that's flowing down to your bottom line. And what savings could you pass on to your customers then? Think about what charge rates you could afford to give if you're best in class here, if you've solved for these problems and you're best provider. You've got customer satisfaction, you've got the reliability, as you said, you've got increased revenue, and you could afford to pass on some of that to your customers.
Yeah, it's a scale, isn't it? So basically scale.
And the reliability factor falls in, if we look at the UK charge point regulations, there's the reliability side of 99%. They have to be 99% reliable, not just turn the chargers off, to kind of avoid that bit of data, because I'm sure they find it, but actually making sure that those chargers are reliable. So if we talk about, just go back a second. So what we're saying about with the payment terminal, if you've put that extra layer of strength into the internet, are we looking, or the signals that are going to the charger? Are we also looking at the fact that, because there are some back office systems that kind of are problematic, but maybe that's because of the delay in the, or the instability. So are we talking about it's going to stabilise that? So it's not going to, like you said, Catherine, it's not going to answer all of the problems, but it's going to stabilise things enough to get to a stage where the payment's working and the back office system has got enough time to go, is it that? Oh, okay, we're all right now.
But Liz, you're absolutely right. Stability is almost important as the speed. If you have regular, consistent, then you don't have breakages, you don't have collapses, and you don't have breakages. So stability is almost, well, they're probably, equally important. And I think for all companies, particularly the ISPs, but the EV chargers, so it isn't just the cost savings in terms of it isn't just extra revenue generation. It's cost savings too. I don't know if you've ever examined the cost of customer service for either EV chargers, but particularly the ISPs. It's enormous because they've got so many complaints all the time. The cost of taking calls, returning emails, investigating problems, the cost of customer service is enormous because you've got a subpar product offering. If you improve your product offering, now you've got happy customers and it costs you less. It's just win, 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 win. But you have to embrace new technology. You can't be the dinosaur out in the wilderness here. You've got to embrace new tech to move forward.
And actually, I'm going to give an example. Again, I'm not going to say who the CPO is, but there is a CPO who is known for getting the cable stuck in your car at both ends. And I experienced this in Suffolk last March at 11:30 at night. I'd left the car to charge in a hotel car park, and by the time I came back, it was charged. I knew it was charged because I'd seen it on my little app on my phone. And I got back to the car, and the light was flashing green. So instead of a kind of constant green, it was flashing green, and I was just thinking, oh God, what does that mean? I couldn't get onto the CPO's app, and it wasn't saying anything. Oh, finished your session. Couldn't get the cable out at all. It's not what you need in a partly lit, dimly lit car park at 11:30 at night, particularly. And bear in mind, I just want to say to everybody, please bear in mind, I know I come back with, kind of examples of things where it's gone wrong, but I've had some really good experiences, but it's those bad experiences, and I'm happy to put up with these because I enjoy driving my EV. I love it. And I want loads of people to adopt this. But actually, if you think about, there's lots of people who haven't got the tolerance to put up with this. It's a different kettle of fish, and that's what I think about the new people coming in. So I'll go back to my little story. So basically, I got the cable was stuck at both ends. So there was a customer support, when I finally realised, because you couldn't really see where the customer support number was, when I finally realised there was an automated chatbot saying, and one of the options was, if your cable is stuck in your car, please do da-da-da-da, which was lock your car, open it 5 times, lock it. It was one of those, it was really, and I just thought, do you know what? If you've had to have that on your answer phone, on your chatbot,
it happens all the time.
Not looked at the root cause of this.
Yeah.
And I've written about this recently, and again, I've not talked about who it is, but people will know if they've had cables stuck in their cars. But it's about just solve the problem. Don't just put a sticking plaster on it. Try and solve the problem. And this is the stuff that I try and do as a consultant, and what your system is trying to do. It's solving problems, isn't it?
The thing is that could you imagine, Liz, we all say, and I've heard it from, all EV people, we've had good experiences, but we've had a few bad experiences. The thing is, you can't expect people to accept any bad experience. The reason being, could you imagine now if our emergency services relied on that? Could you imagine? God. Yeah? They get a call, they got to go, and then they're stuck talking to a chatbot because they can't get the cable removed. We can't allow things these things to happen. The problem is that we've got too much apathy. It's got to stop. We have to demand perfection. We show up with our internal combustion vehicles. We expect to put the fuel in and leave. EV people deserve the same thing. It's that simple.
It's best practice,
It
really.
is.
We need to develop best practice, and that's kind of what I'm all for. And that's part of, so your solution is fantastic. The work that I'm doing is aiming for, we're all trying to push, reduce that level of apathy and make sure that people are heading towards that level of best practice, because it should just be an experience that you don't even need to think of.
No. And the thing is that's the way that we set up the business as well. Everything that we do is priced in a way that it basically becomes a no-brainer. I mean, the total cost of ownership, I mean, they'll make it back in not having service charge call-outs and everything else within a couple of months, depending on which CPO you're looking at. One of them in particular, we know that they would actually get it back within a month. This is how, nonsensical it is that they're not looking to actually solve these solutions at their root cause.
So on the payment Guardian product, which is one of the fundamental sort of ways to help EV charging, it has failover ability with inside the technology, and we should probably explain that a little bit, because that's all payment terminals sort of everywhere. So obviously the internet can be intermittent. We know that. And we can't, if the service provider cuts their internet service for whatever reason, we can't solve for that. But what we can do is have an instant and automatic, as we see the degradation of an internet service provider system. So not when it's failed, but as it's degrading, we can instantly and very quickly fail over into a 4G or a 5G solution. And then the system will constantly be checking when the internet comes back on with a strong enough signal that we can fail back into, the sort of the more classic internet connection. So that the idea is you should always be able to connect through either 4G, 5G, or the internet. So this ability for the software to be able to fail over and fail back very, very fast, and not at the point of failure, but at the point of degradation, is a big part of the solution here. So you're not relying on one system; you've got backup solutions within your service,
which is really important. So I was going to say, so this is about being proactive rather than reactive, isn't it? So when you see a service like this start degrading in the way that you're talking about, and like you say, you've got these backups as well, do you also feed it back to your customer and say, we've seen this degradation, it's decreasing by X, and maybe either you need to change provider, or do you provide that feedback to them, or do you just kind of keep giving them that that stability?
So one of the things I think is probably pretty unique about Enigma Net is we are working on, and shortly will be able to provide customers with very detailed information about how their internet is functioning. Yeah. So I don't know how popular that will actually be with ISPs, because when I call up and they say, "Oh, we've just tested your line and there's absolutely nothing wrong," and it's so infuriating when you've had break-in systems for the last 48 hours and they tell you, "Oh, everything's fine." I think it's going to be very, very helpful for consumers, businesses, to be able to say, well, here's my report of what you've actually been doing over the last 24, 48 hours, week, month, whatever it might be. And so that's going to really show up the shortcomings of their services.
So the ISPs, when you call up and you've got a complaint about the service they're providing, they will point you to a speed test which they operate. Yeah, they will ask you to obviously call in every time and actually make the complaint and everything. So we're going to become a bit of a thorn in the side, because we'll basically be able to provide them a full report, probably for whatever duration that they want, to show actually how much bandwidth they were actually receiving over a period of time. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, do you know what? Giving people a test like that is like marking your own homework anyway, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm going to give you
that's
this
right.
test.
Yeah,
Nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Wink,
yeah,
wink. It's not going to do anything. So we're just going to tell you a great big fib saying our
Yeah.
systems are absolutely perfect. But yeah, you might as well just go back to dial-up, but we're not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the problem, the ISPs are self-regulating, and they've been allowed to do this by
yeah,
Ofcom.
yeah,
It's an act of
yeah,
criminality.
yeah,
But the reality of it is, it's like, if you go and buy, you go and buy petrol or your EV, and you go and pay for, 1 kilowatt and you get, zero point 0.5 kilowatts, you've got grounds of a complaint for that. Yeah, weights and measures. The internet does not have to abide by those rules.
oh God.
They can tell you that they are giving you 1 gigabit per second. They only legally have to give you 500 megabits per second, but they keep on
yeah.
advertising it as 1 gigabit per second.
That
So
was a big discovery for me, Liz, that the fact that the internet service providers are only required to give you 50% of what you've contracted with them. And the really awful thing is you don't get that all the
No,
time.
no.
so imagine you are a CPO and you've paid for your 4G SIMs, for example, and you think, right, okay, I need a minimum of 4 megabits per second upload, because that's the bare minimum that I need just to get the payment terminals to work and to communicate with my device. And then the reality of it is, without them knowing, all they're getting is 2. And this is what we found with security companies that are running CCTV cameras and things like that. This is the issue that they're having. I spoke to one company, obviously, in the States, and they were like, yeah, we can't get these cameras to work out in the US. We've got these 4G, 5G SIMs. We should have 500 megs download. And I said, right, okay, you do realize that's only download and your upload is like 50. And they were like, well, no, we should be getting it both ways. I said, no, no, no. 4G SIMs are asymmetrical. It's usually only 10% of what you're actually
God.
paying for, and then you get 50% of that.
Yeah.
So they needed 60 megabits per second. They were getting 20.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And this, I suppose, this is it. So okay. So can we just talk for a second about data breaches? Because so what is actually happening that you know of? I mean, I've heard of data breaches and hacking into charging, and I didn't particularly want to out it like this, but actually, we need to recognise that this stuff, if it is in the public, well, it's not the public domain, that it, on the internet,
Yeah.
in inverted commas, that it is potentially hackable. What's happening, Glenn?
So this comes down to companies like NordVPN and Shark, all the standard VPN providers. Their protocol effectively is something called OpenVPN. And,
Yeah.
It should say it in the name, it's OpenVPN. It's a source that people have used to create their own VPN networks.
Right.
But it's available to everybody. Because it's available to everybody, everybody's figured out ways to exploit it. They keep on putting more encryption on it, but fundamentally, they know where to go for it. But what's made the breaches worse was that the owners of the companies that run these VPN services have all had data breaches. At some point somewhere, the usernames and passwords of all the users have been hacked. So if you've got a CPO, for example, that set up these VPNs 3 years ago, they may not even be aware that all of their passwords have been compromised.
Jesus.
So somebody can just literally get within the network and then they can go and do whatever they want to do. That's one way that the breaches actually happen. The second way is obviously that people can actually just bombard, the servers, the denial of service attacks and everything else like that. Ransomware, so they can literally, hold these hostage. And I can see at a point that that's going to start happening to the CPOs as well, and they are not protected against it. A lot of their infrastructure is cloud-based, for whatever reason, cost rollout, and that is another point of weakness, because where it is in the cloud, there's no real secure way for it then to get to their devices. They are trying to get Microsoft, AWS are pushing these very expensive VPN services that they've got. But to give you an idea, to one location, they could be paying up to anywhere from £1,500 to £2,000 a month for that service.
What? No
Yeah.
way.
You can see why a lot of people will roll the dice and maybe not have all of their security in place. And that's the thing, is that most of this, most of the security out there, it's kind of like a protection racket. Do you know what I mean? They show up and they're like, yeah, we can sell you this and you've got to take this to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And then when a breach actually does happen, they say, well, you didn't do everything we told you to do. You're on your own. And they kind of hide behind what's called ISO 27001 for this. And they've actually put the onus of the data breaches back to the people that use the service rather than the ISPs or the big cloud providers.
I think we should be clear, keeping, getting on top of and even trying to get ahead of cyber hacks is a really, really hard thing to do. There are very sophisticated computers and people who are constantly thinking how do you access, how do you get in, how do you breach, and very famous companies and governments and government infrastructure, has been hacked. So this isn't an easy thing to solve. And if you solve it today, it doesn't mean you've solved it for tomorrow. It's a constant, ongoing issue. It's a very hard thing to stay in touch with. But thinking more clearly, using new technology and figuring out how your data is transmitted is a really key sort of first step.
So the way that we do it to sort of get around the majority of the breaches, for example, is our servers, for example, don't rely on things like VMware, for example, which had a horrendous breach several years ago, which took down numerous servers all around the world. The second thing is, because obviously our tunnel is proprietary, built by a guy in the UK, there is only a very small number of people that actually know the actual source code of the actual tunnels. So you've got that level of security that it isn't open to everybody. The other thing is the way that we can actually obfuscate the data as well. So for example, we don't have to send your data down one private tunnel. We can actually send it down several, so that even if one was breached, they're not getting all your data. They're only getting portions of it, and they can't do anything with it.
Blimey. So this is, you are looking at preventative measures, aren't you? Why I know you said you're going to be a thorn in people's sides in some ways, but why aren't other companies doing this, and how are you doing it? In order, how cost effective are your services? What would people? You said how much people would be paying if they went for one site on with Microsoft or whatever. How cost effective is it? Is it for them to use Enigma Net then?
So if we're just talking about cybersecurity and cyber hacks, and then companies, governments, organizations will always have their security layers and levels, no question. And we don't want to interfere with any of those structures at all. We should be really clear. We don't want to substitute for anyone's infrastructure. We call our overarching technology and plus, with the hopefully simple message there that we're additive. That's the and bit. And then the plus bit is, and now we give you all these enhancements. So we're not trying to disrupt any structure that exists. We know that's quite a hard decision for companies, people, businesses, organizations, etc. But if you can have this overlay, if you like, in the way that your data is transmitted, and you can make yourself stable, secure, faster, more private. If you can achieve all of that, as we said, in a cost-effective way, we want to make that a very, very easy decision.
So if somebody's interested in talking to you about this, what do they need? Where do they need to go? How do they find you? Because I think this bit's really important, and I will provide your web details and things like that in the show notes. Where's the best place to find you both?
Well, yeah, if you just head to enigmanet.ai, then obviously we can reach out to us. Again, our contact details are all there. Phone us. Anything. We're here to help.
Okay, and I think I'm gonna actually ask you one final question, because we've gone through so much here, and it's been really, it has blown my mind, but in a really good way. What if you wanted the viewers and listeners to kind of remember you for one thing, or if you wanted to remember one thing about you, what would that be?
That we can give you reliable, stable internet services for all your applications. Bearing in mind there's something like 27 devices in the home on average attached to the internet. So a lot of home use as well as business use. We can provide you with reliability, stability, your privacy and security. We can give you that whole combination of minimum required services, and you don't have to compromise on any of it.
I mean, you've kind of sold me, really, especially, kind of some of even just as a small business, I realise from the things you were talking about, ring doorbells and all the other tech related stuff. I don't have a Wi-Fi enabled kettle just yet, but we're all doing this, aren't we? Whether you're at home or whether you're in your business, and if you're running a business, you really, really need to make sure that everything that you've got is secure, it's held, it's not hackable or breachable. So actually, if you've got this wraparound that will provide that and fill in those potholes, then why not? Gosh, is there just, I'm going to leave it open to you for a second, Glenn. Is there one final thing that you'd like to kind of let people, kind of have a think about, just to kind of leave it in their minds as we leave?
Yeah, I think the main thing I'd get people to think about is really think about how much is the internet actually affecting you when it is not working.
Yeah.
And it's not until you really ask yourself that question, because you just sit there and you just accept what's going on, that you don't even consider that you need to fix it. The minute you actually start thinking, it's taking me ages to upload this video, it's taking me ages to send this file, or I can't connect to this service, have a look at how much time that is actually taking. And if it's taking up more than you're prepared to give up, or it's costing you, do something about it. Yeah. You do not have to accept what you're given. Yeah. Make a change, make yourself more efficient. Yeah. Because ultimately that's all we're looking for at the end of the day, is just get some of our own time back.
And like I said, time is money.
Yeah.
And actually, as I gave the analogy earlier on, if something that you are doing is affected by your connectivity or the system that you're working on, and it's not efficient enough, you need to do something about it. And this is one place that you can do it. So on that note, I'm just going to say thank you again. Honestly, I'm hoping, and I think we have broken this down into simple terms. But yeah, please just head to Enigma Net, to the website. I will provide all of the information and the links and things like that for both Glenn and Katherine in the show notes. But actually, I think as well, for those of you watching and listening, if you know or you are a charge point operator, and please listen back to this, listen to it again, or just talk to Glenn and Katherine, because as an organisation, you need to make sure that not only you're not hackable, but your users, your EV drivers that are plugging in are not hackable either. That you keep the data breaches down to a minimum, and if they can support your, do the wraparound on the payment terminals and making sure that you're providing that stability, then please share it with CPOs who actually may not be listening to this. And I always ask everybody to kind of share and kind of like and comment. But I think this one is really important, because I don't think I think there's a lot of people who don't realise that the internet has so many potholes. So on that note, I'm going to just say thank you to Glenn and Katherine. It's been wonderful talking to you. And to everybody else watching and listening, I'm going to say thank you, and I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching Electric Evolution. I really love bringing you these weekly conversations about sustainability, renewables, and building a cleaner future together. If you're passionate about positive change, please like, subscribe, and share with others who also care about these topics. You can also download our white paper, Plugging into the Future, at fullcircleci.co.uk and join the discussion on improving sustainable transport, or email me at liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks for watching. Bye.